Okay, the reason why I brought the donuts today is because the main character, Skippy, dies in the first 2 pages of the book while commencing in a donut eating contest. So the rest of the book is pretty much background on why he died and how he died. And it's not because of the donuts, it's because he overdosed on painkillers. So, let me also preface this by saying that everyone that I am talking about in this presentation is 14 years old. Okay, so just kind of keep that number in your mind when I'm saying what I'm talking about, okay? So, my book is Skippy Dies by Paul Murray. And I'm going to highlight in this presentation what it's like to be a teenager, because we all know. We've been a teenager recently, and some of us are now graduating into adulthood, so that's exciting. Some of us are still teenagers, like me. Anyway, so it's teenage years are kind of a weird time because your brain is not fully developed. Yet you're asked by society and by adults to be able to comprehend adult situations and deal with real adult emotions. So you kind of get these awkward, weird, horrible situations that arise because we just can't deal with what's going on around us. So let's delve into what it means to be a teen. When you're little, you kind of have this innocence about you. And like you ask any, I don't know, like middle schooler, like, oh, like, what do you think about girls? And everyone's like, oh God, girls, what? And so you just kind of really innocent, and then all of a sudden, like, this switch just flips, and all of a sudden you're very not innocent, and like, all these hormones are just all over, and you just aren't the same. And so, pretty iconic scene from Sandlot. Because all of a sudden you're very interested in girls. It's like, what? Oh, not me, but... Okay, so you are dealing with all these kind of emotions, like very real emotions, like, am I the only one going through this kind of a situation? Like sadness, depression, isolation, anger, frustration, and you just feel like no one's around you to help you, and you kind of need a support system. So for many of the people that make it through these years unscathed, they have parents to turn to or other people that can ask questions. And so you realize, especially reading this book, that it's very important to have someone with you when you go on this journey, because things can happen. And another big theme of this book is love and loss. And the first big example of this would be Skippy, the main character, and Lori. Lori is a girl that goes to an all-girls boarding school that neighbors Skippy's all-boys boarding school, and she's kind of a slut. She gets involved with a drug dealer who's also 14, his name is Carl, and she does like, that name, and she like starts to trade like sexual favors for her diet pills, which are just Adderall that he is selling to girls. And then she gets involved with Skippy, who is this really kind of innocent, sweet boy who has never been in love before, and he's just infatuated with Lori. And anyway, they have this kind of semi-relationship, and then one day Lori cheats on Skippy with Carl, and Carl videotapes it, and Lori does not know. And Carl then sends said video to Skippy. Skippy sees it, sees Lori cheating on him, can't deal with the emotions, and then several days later overdoses on painkillers because he just can't handle the heartbreak and depression. So. Another love and loss situation is after Skippy dies, all of his friends kind of, since they're still childlike, since they're just 14, they think that he's not really dead or that they can bring him back to life, so they try like all these seances and like weird kind of like scientific experiments, hoping that he's gonna come back one day. So again, it just shows that when you're that young, you're expected to deal with your best friend dying, but you can't because your brain can't handle that people are really gone. So teens have 4 options for guidance when they are growing up, and one of which is society. And this book kind of shows that society is kind of corrupting teenagers, because you have things like, you know, Katy Perry and Miley Cyrus twerking all up on people, and then like Riff Raff, you know. And it just, they don't serve as good role models for kids, and a good example of this would be Lori. She looks up to a pop star named Bethany, whose lyrics are so explicit. And she's like, yo, yeah, like, I'm Bethany, like, blah, 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 like, I need to be a skinny slut for, like, people to like me. So that's why she gets into the diet pills, and that's how she gets involved with Carl. And she ends up having to go to rehab for her pill addiction. Again, everyone's 14. So it's just very serious things, so it just shows that, like, society maybe is not a good role model for teenagers, especially in this day and age. Second option is friends who are really just as clueless as you are, so not a good guidance avenue. Example of this would be this kid named Mario, who is like this, considers himself to be this kind of like Casanova kind of a character, and he has this like lucky condom in his wallet, and he's like, oh yeah, this is how I get all the babes. And then one day the kids are like, well, how lucky is that condom if you've never used it? And so it's just kind of like these things that you're just like, okay, sure. And again, like Skippy dies and his friends can't handle it, so. And they can get you into trouble, like Project X or the Goonies. Another is school, and especially at Skippy's school, they really focus on like being macho, so they want to force all the kids to play rugby because it's a manly sport, and it's to like get all out that like teen angst and anger and whatnot. And Skippy does not play rugby, he swims instead, so he's kind of looked down upon by his fellow classmates because he can't be that macho. And another interesting thing that I picked up on in this book is his school is basically an inferno. So if y'all remember last year from The Great Gatsby, the inferno is kind of this horrible place where authority does not exist, so there's like morality is not really there, and it's just what should be there is not there. So, in this case, you know, teachers and principals are supposed to be the authority of the school. Well, when Skippy dies, it comes out that his swim coach molested him on his swim meet, and Skippy doesn't remember this because he like pulled a muscle or whatever, and the coach gave him Oxycontin, and because he's so young, it kind of just overtook his entire system, so he became unconscious, and that's when the coach molested him. And the coach, out of guilt, showed up to a teacher's house and, like, in a drunken stupor, confessed this whole situation to him. And the teacher did the right thing, or attempted to do the right thing, and went to the principal and said, hey, this guy needs to be reprimanded because you just can't go around doing that. And the principal made the teacher sign a contract saying that he would not talk about it to anybody. And he pretty much just swept it under the rug, and it never came out. So no one ever found out about it. Skippy's parents never knew. No one ever knew about this. And so again, like, this teacher should have been reprimanded, but he wasn't because this is an inferno. And another example of this would be at the school dance. Two teachers were chaperoning, it was a boy and a girl, and they went off halfway through to have a little romantic tryst in the classroom, and leaving the kids unsupervised, and somebody snuck Viagra and alcohol into the punch bowl, and so they come back and the kids are in this giant orgy, and it's just like uncomfortable and horrible. Anyway, so again, like, the teachers should have been there to police these kids, but they weren't there, so it's just, yeah, inferno. And the last one is drugs and alcohol, so when you don't have anyone to turn to, especially with these kids, because since they're at a boarding school, especially the boys, the parents just drop off the kids and never visit them. Like, Skippy's dad never visits him. None of the kids ever get visited by their parents, and so they feel completely alone. So they don't have that love and acceptance that they're craving, so they try and find it other ways. And a very common one is drugs and alcohol, as you see by Lori and Skippy's friends, and Carl. Carl ends up actually doing heroin, so there's that. Still 14. So yes, and it basically just screws up everyone. Lori's in rehab at the end of the book, and she almost commits suicide, but then at the end decides not to. Skippy commits suicide through an overdose. Carl is strung out on heroin. So again, it's very important as teenagers to find that love and acceptance from suitable places like your parents, and instead of, I don't know, drugs, alcohol, society, things like that. So, the end. I think Tina Fey can kind of sum up what a lot of people think about teenagers. Alright.
Alright.